You might not know this, but I'm a pretty big fan of Ghost in the Shell. The 1995 Mamoru Oshii film is one of my favorite movies ever, and I recently made this pile of shit discussing this pile of shit. I've seen all of the anime iterations of Ghost in the Shell, read all of the manga, but I've never actually played any of the games. It's only been recently, and I mean recently as in the past 10 years, that I'd really gotten into Ghost in the Shell, or even anime in general. But since I've started making the videos that I do, and since I really love Ghost in the Shell, despite its recent blunder, I've decided to go and take a look at the games. So, today we're going to be taking a look at Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex, First Assault Online! With its fast and frenetic gameplay, Ghost in the Shell... I got you. No, we're really going to take a look at the 1997 PlayStation 1 title, Ghost in the Shell. I don't really want to look at the free-to-play shooter. God. Maybe next year. Oh, well, maybe not. But like I said, before making this video, I've never even touched any of the Ghost in the Shell games, so I'm actually pretty excited to give these games a fair shake. Will they hold up to my impossibly high standards of what a good anime should be, or will it flounder like a shitty live-action adaptation? Okay guys, I'm sorry. I just really did not like the live-action movie. If you really want to hear me bitch about it more, go watch the other video, but onwards, I won't reference the movie at all. As usual, this video will try to cover everything about the game, from the music and gameplay to its history and the story. So if you don't like spoilers, go play the fucking game. Let's go! As usual, I want to try to jump right into the gameplay, but before that, I have to mention this amazing intro. Hold on. It's coming. Here it is. It's quite phenomenal, but if you just came off of watching the 1995 Mamoru Oshii movie, the change in art direction is quite intense. The movie is a lot more muted, without a lot of vibrancy and exceptional amounts of green and blue hues strewn throughout. This animation here is a lot more colorful. Fans of the series will know that this animation more closely resembles the art style of the manga, probably because Shiro Masamune, the original author of the manga, worked on the story and art direction for the game. So instead of getting this drab, monotonous major that we had in the movie, the major here is a bit more upbeat, somewhat of a smartass, and especially in this intro, a lot more erotic. The game has quite a few cutscenes too, and they all look really good, save for the fact that they're compressed to hell. The cutscenes were produced by Production IG and Hiroyuki Kitakubo, who worked on titles such as JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and Blood the Last Vampire, directed the animation. Toshihiro Kawamoto, who worked on Cowboy Bebop and Wolf's Rain, worked as a character designer and animation supervisor. The scenes within the game are colored using a full digital technique, with them being a combination of cel shading and 3D rendered backgrounds. Again, the animation throughout the game resembles the manga a lot more closely, with characters' attitudes and expressions matching that more than anything else. I like it. I was trying to find some higher quality versions of these cutscenes, mostly so I could rewatch the intro over and over again, but all I could really find was this video here by Bolitar 2025. It says HQ Remastered in the title, but all I can tell is that it looks like they might have run it through some sort of filter and interpolated the video so it looks smoother. It's incredibly blurry though, and it makes me want to put on my glasses, but I'm a foot away from my screen. I should need my glasses. So either you get a JPEG that's been screenshotted 30 times, or it looks like someone came in and slathered your computer monitor with Vaseline. Take your pick. Alright, now let's actually delve into the gameplay. I honestly didn't know what to expect with the game being a PlayStation 1 title, but I do have mixed feelings about the gameplay. On one hand, I would really have loved to have played as an actual member of Section 9, but on the other hand, the gameplay presented here is actually pretty smooth, especially for a PlayStation 1 title. For those who waited however many goddamn minutes just to get to the gameplay, you don't control a member of Section 9, sort of, but rather you control a person controlling a Fuchikoma. You know, one of these spider tanks. Not this one, and not this one either. Fuck those other comas. Essentially, the gameplay is a third-person action shooter where you slide around on a spider tank and blow shit up. But not only do you circle strafe around stupid idiots who think they can take on a tank, you can also climb on walls, ceilings, and rooftops. Being able to traverse walls and ceilings and rooftops isn't anything new even on the PlayStation 1, but it's surprising how well you can move around the terrain, especially without any sort of joystick input. and especially since the game is actually pretty fast-paced. As far as the controls go, here's a visual representation from the game itself. The left and right bumpers strafe the tank, the D-pad rotates the tank, the X button is jump, the circle button shoots a grenade, and the square button shoots. As well, if you hold the square button, you can lock onto and shoot missiles at targets within range. Finally, as you see here, the triangle button doesn't do a goddamn thing, but the game is lying to you because you use the triangle button to exit or back out of menus, but who cares? Apparently, you can get the game to work with analog controls, but whether it was my settings in EPSXE, I know, the fact that I'm using an Xbox One controller, or the fact that I'm clinically retarded, I don't know. The default controls worked fine for me. So you go around and shoot people, and shoot turrets, and you shoot other tanks, but what is there to do outside of that? Well, on this first level, you get keys by shooting other tanks, and then you fight a boss at the end of the level. And then on the next level, you make your way through a sewer system and shoot more enemies, and you fight another boss. And but on the third level's where it's at. You have to race against the clock to defuse bombs, and you defuse bombs by blowing them up, shooting them, and then you fight a boss at the end. Okay, for real now, guys. The fourth level's actually where it's at. You slide along in a boat, and you shoot more enemies while dodging enemies, and then you fight a boss at the end who has a timer. Alright, you get the gist. I don't hate the gameplay. In fact, far from it, but man, it's kind of repetitive, which isn't that bad because the game itself is like 2 hours long, if that. And I actually like the general fast and frenetic gameplay, I'm being serious this time. Jumping from wall to wall and killing enemies is pretty fun, and it somewhat captures, I guess, being a spider tank. Each mission has objectives strewn throughout, but they all end up being the same. Some of them just have timers. The sections like the fourth mission sort of reminds me of Star Fox, but without the ability to control myself how I want. Slow down, you cunt! Ah! The fifth mission is pretty fun, and it showed a bit of promise. You're tasked with pursuing and fighting a cyborg equipped with optical camouflage. I would like the idea of fighting an enemy with this ability and having to follow or listen to their footsteps in the water, but the game doesn't like my settings, or maybe the game just doesn't like the emulator, or maybe I'm just clinically retarded, because when the enemy went invisible, the game just rendered a black box. I was going to fix this later, but I ended up beating the game in one sitting, so I didn't bother. Sorry. There's a couple of different item pickups that you can find, which are health packs and grenades. The grenades function somewhat like the smart bombs from Star Fox. One thing I would like to mention is that you can switch between first and third person by pressing select on the controller. The first person mode actually works really well. The game sometimes forces you into first person, for instance if the camera would be too close to a wall. This is especially prevalent in the second stage. I enjoy this more than a camera that freaks out constantly or sometimes outright refuses to function. I'm looking at you, Rising Sand, you piece of shit. A couple of levels near the end get a little creative with the Fujikoma's movements, and I especially thought that the boss on the second stage was a bit more creative, which gave you a full 360-degree movement around the screen. Speaking of bosses though, they're pretty easy. In fact, fighting most of the enemies in the game is easy. Typically speaking, the boss levels are just open arenas, which make it incredibly effortless to just circle strafe around the boss and shoot it until it dies. I imagine that the game would be a bit more interesting if the boss arenas had been bigger, and had more obstacles that both you and the enemy could traverse. A few of the levels have towers, bridges, and other platforms that you can climb on, under, or around, so I'm not exactly sure why the bosses were so exact, but I wonder if it might be due to time constraints, technological constraints, or maybe if they were just lazy. I'd love to ask the developers this, but well, let's just take a few minutes to talk about the developer. We're essentially done with the gameplay anyways. The game was developed by Exact, the excellent application create team, who was renamed Sugar and Rockets in 1998, but then they ceased to exist in the year 2000 after they were consolidated by Sony. Exact had developed a few games beforehand. They were well known for their Jumping Flash series of games, As well, they developed Geograph Seal and a Popolacroix game. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. There's a video by a channel called Dongled that has a series of videos named, "Dude, you haven't played this game?" Mike Levy, who produces the series, stated that Exact/Sugar and Rockets helped develop Shadow of the Colossus, the Ape Escape games, and the Gravity Rush games.
The game was developed by Exact, makers of games like the Jumping Flash series. This studio was swallowed up by Sony and has had a hand in producing games with Team Ico, like Shadow of the Colossus. They also worked on games from the Ape Escape series, and more recently the truly excellent PlayStation 4 titles Gravity Rush and Gravity Rush 2.
I'm not going to say that he's outright wrong, because he does also state that Exact developed Jumping Flash and Ghost in the Shell, but everything I can find online states that Exact or Sugar and Rockets is, or rather was, a subsidiary to Sony Interactive Entertainment, SIE, and that they were swallowed up and promptly disposed of, like a gas station condom or anything that EA acquires. Other websites online state that the company ceased to exist in 2000, like I stated earlier. Outside of Ape Escape 1, the development team itself wouldn't have been able to touch the other games that Mike listed. But that's not to say that parts of the development team weren't repurposed to other teams such as, say, Team Eco, Project Siren, or various positions among SIE itself. The only person so far that I found that worked on any of the previous games listed was Tetsuji Yamamoto, who headed Sugar and Rockets and worked on a couple of Ape Escape games. I've asked Mike if he's able to find anything concrete to state that the development team had in fact been repositioned to various teams owned by Sony, and therefore making his assertion that Exact helped in creating the aforementioned games correct. But when I contacted him, he told me that he assumed that Exact and their ideas probably made it into other games, such as Gravity Rush, simply due to the way the gameplay is for those games. And while I understand where he's coming from, because comparing the Gravity Rush to the Jumping Flash games, you could draw somewhat of a connection there, I don't really like the idea of attributing the creation of a series of games to a team of developers that may or may not have had any real influence on said games without any actual evidence. I don't want to start any sort of beef with Mike. He seems like a good guy and actually liked his video on Ghost in the Shell, but it just irks me that he said that Exact had an influence on the aforementioned games without any evidence to back it up. Mike's video on Ghost in the Shell for the PS1 is pretty good though, and I would say that we share a lot of the same opinions on the game. You should go check out his channel. I did do quite a bit of research into a few of the prominent names behind Exact/Sugar and Rockets. I've had my fill, but unfortunately, I just didn't find anything too noteworthy, but just to list it out. I found that Tetsuji Yamamoto, who did a work on a couple of the Ape Escape games, Hiroyuki Sayagusa, who was one of the founders of Exact, continues to work in game development, and what I can find most recently, he worked on D4, Dark Dreams Don't Die, as a writer. As well, I found out that a somewhat well-known Japanese developer who worked with Sugar and Rockets, Yoko Taro, you know, the guy with the mask? Yeah, I tried reaching out to him on Twitter too, just because I'd like to speak to someone who worked on or even near that team, but I was ignored. And, yeah, honestly, that's it. I tried looking through the Wayback Machine on Sugar and Rocket's now defunct website, but that didn't provide a lot of information. I compared the credits between Gravity Rush and Ghost in the Shell just to be sure, and there aren't any matching names from what I could tell. I scoured the official US PlayStation magazine for interviews or articles on the game, or just with the developers, but even then it was pretty mundane stuff with the voice actors. I'll post links to all of the websites that I looked through and found anything on in the description below if anyone else is really interested. Unfortunately, it just seems that a lot of the development team has just up and disappeared. I can't really find anyone who worked on Ghost in the Shell. I would love to ask the developers some questions, but maybe I'm just looking in the wrong places, or the information is that well tucked away. Fuck man, UEP Systems was easier than this. Shit, I found a couple of the developers on Facebook and chatted with them there. If anyone knows where or how to contact any of the developers who actually worked on Ghost in the Shell, I'd really appreciate it. I'd love to ask them a few questions. But that's essentially the history of Ghost in the Shell for PlayStation 1. I really wish that there were more games like this though, where you get to play a badass spider tank. climbing up buildings and dispatching enemies like it's nothing. We have this, of course, but its repetitive nature makes the game lose its charm, and it's not like the game has any high replay value outside of nostalgia, or maybe wanting to speedrun. I just wish that there was something that made this game more memorable outside of the fact that it's a Ghost in the Shell game and that it controls well, but only for 2 hours. If I were just buying this game in 1997 for $60, or well, I think it's actually like 50, but either way, I'd still feel gypped. What's there is good, sure, but for the same price you could just buy the 1995 movie and, still have a better time. The only other game I can think of that has similar gameplay nowadays, funny enough, is Watch Dogs, a game that I loathe. Humorous to say, but when I played Watch Dogs for the first time and played through the Spider Tank minigame, I kept thinking to myself, man, this in itself would make a great standalone game if it had a bit more content and wasn't tied down by Ubisoft. Hopefully in the future we can get a decent successor to Ghost in the Shell on the PS1. The story is one of my least favorite parts of this game. I know that I've said in the past that I don't typically dwell on stories in games, unless it's complete trash, but come on, it's a Ghost in the Shell game. I have to talk about what happens. It definitely feels like something that would happen in the Ghost in the Shell universe, especially in the manga, but it lacks a lot of the substance that you'll find in the movies, shows, and, well, the manga. All of the cutscenes mashed together makes up, less than 15 minutes worth of any real story content? I mean, it's pretty good for what it is. The story of Section 9 investigating a terrorist organization for an attack on the Megatech Corporation's building sounds like the beginning to an episode of Standalone Complex. A few of the twists and turns that the story takes is nice, and I'd love to watch actual episodes with this style of animation and more humorous characters, but it feels like it's lacking meat. I think that my problem is this, and I'm going to try to explain it as best as I can, but it might be hard because I'm clinically retarded. Take, for example, the entirety of the story in this game, and let's compare it to an episode of Standalone Complex. There's a lot of similar beats to how the story progresses. Something happens, and Section 9 is called upon to remedy the situation. Characters discuss the situations, who's involved, and their plan of action. In a normal episode, you, the viewer, would sit back while sipping on your cup of sake and holding your dakimakura while the Major, Bato, Togasa, and whoever enacts those plans while communicating about what's going on during the current situation. You'd get to see the Major, or any other character for that matter, infiltrate and expediently dispatch opposition, whether she or they are in a Tachikoma or Fuchikoma or not. The action throughout the series, whether it's in the movies or the shows, feels deliberate, well executed, and somewhat subdued or smaller scale, for the most part at least. Even in the episodes of Standalone Complex where the team is trying to fight against large machines, such as the Spider Tank in the Runaway Evidence episode. The whole episode is devoted to stopping a single powerful machine before it can cause havoc, not fighting against an army of soldiers. Or the episode with the Runaway Jigabachi, where the team essentially has to accomplish the same thing. Or how about the episode where the Major's actually in the army, but instead of having massive all-out war, the episode is Saito recounting his run-in with the Major, which ends in both of them essentially only fighting one another in a battle to determine who has the better bluff. My point is, Ghost in the Shell never felt like a gratuitous series of fights and non-stop action. The shows and movies knew how to appropriately space and show action sequences throughout the episode. It was like a little gift that tied all the drama together. The game, however, which I will say I love the animated bit in between each mission, the animation looks great and the story and drama feels appropriate. The characters are humorous and likable. But god damn it, there's too much action for my taste. But don't get me wrong, like I said earlier, the game is fun, fluid, and functional. But trying to judge this as a story in the Ghost in the Shell universe, it feels like there's too much action, which takes up too much time. Although the game is fun, and I think that it's at least worth trying out if you're a fan of Ghost in the Shell, or this type of gameplay, it almost makes me feel like a Ghost in the Shell game would be limited by its story. I don't want to go off on some other tangent about something that doesn't pertain to this game specifically, but since that new Ghost in the Shell game online, or whatever the fuck it is dying soon anyways, I might as well talk about it a little bit. I didn't like the game because the shooting felt really shitty, and the optimization was fucking atrocious, at least it was like a year ago when I played it, but I have somewhat of the same issue. I thought that the game was actually too fast for what I wanted in a Ghost in the Shell game to be. If anything, I would love more of a Rainbow Six style of game for Ghost in the Shell, or perhaps a game which requires you to investigate and infiltrate certain crime scenes to gather clues about the mission you're currently undertaking. Ghost in the Shell almost feels like it needs a slower, more precise style of game that's not like Call of Duty or a tank shooter where you take on a whole army. Something that will let you flesh out the characters, the story, and the world. So far, out of the couple of Ghost in the Shell games that I've played, nothing really feels like it complements the story. This is actually really funny to be saying because I've said it in the past, such as in my video, that I much prefer gameplay over story any day of the week, and for the most part that's still true. But I'm a big fan of Ghost in the Shell, and I think that you can have a game that both complements the story and is actually a great game. And I'm sorry, I didn't even really talk about the actual story here, did I? Anyways, it starts off by telling you that a terrorist organization called the Human Liberation Front has claimed responsibility for destroying the Megatech Corporation facility. You, along with the other members of Section 9, are sent in to remedy the situation. Section 9 discovers that the terrorists are located in the Bay Area, and Aramaki informs the team that the leader of the terrorist group is a person by the name of Zebra 27. Ishikawa notes that the Energy Ministry has interest in Zebra, and the chief demands further investigation. As you progress, the Human Liberation Front's base is discovered by the team in the Aeropolis 2 tower. As well, the team discovers that the terrorists intend to use a nuclear reactor. Ishikawa informs Aramaki about Sawamura, an Energy Ministry official that has been in collusion with Zebra and his connections with the Megatech Corporation. The reactor begins a meltdown and the Major attempts to remove the protective barrier near the reactor to shut it down, while the rest of the team searches for a control room. The Major disarms the reactor and informs the team that the terrorist leader is located on the top of the Aeropolis 2 tower. But without any means of backup, the rookie that you play has to go in alone and defeat the leader in a free fall off of the tower. Afterwards, it's found out that Sawamura was bribing Megatech to cover up a defect in the reactor, which would have caused a major catastrophe, which they showed it off as a terror attack. Zebra took over the reactor and planned to extort money from Sawamura. And in the end, the Major criticizes you for overusing your Fuchikoma. But I'm just playing the game here! I'm just playing the game! I'm sure you guys can tell though, it seems like it would make a good episode for the Laughing Man or Individual 11 series. You've got corrupt government officials, terrorists, hacking, infiltration, and espionage. I would really like it if it were an actual episode. The soundtrack is very techno-oriented, with quite a few contributors. You've got various tracks from Takeo Ishino, Meek Van Dijk, Brother from Another Planet, Hard Floor, Joey Beltram, Scan X, The Advent, Christian J. Bolland, Dave Angel, and Derek May. The music complements the gameplay extremely well. It really gets you in the mood to fight a bunch of robots and cyborgs and shit. I had read that when pressing the vinyl for the album, either the vinyl itself or the machine that they used to press them would sometimes burn up because the music was too intense. That's really cool if true. I couldn't find anything online about it, but if anyone finds it out, let me know. But yeah, not too much to say about the music. It didn't seem that interesting to me this time. Graphically, the game looks okay. My favorite looking level is the one where you're chasing the cyborg with thermoptic camo, and you end up in an area that's pretty similar to the one where the Major fights that one hacked human in the 1995 movie. It looks alright. I wouldn't necessarily say that the graphics do the series any justice, but it's passable. If anything, I would say that the graphics feel a bit too bland. Maybe it could have used a bit more stylization within the environment or something, but it's missing something that really makes it click with me. While reviewing the footage, it stood out to me that the art style in the game and the art style that the cutscenes had, they don't mesh too well together. The cutscenes seem to be a bit more vibrant with more liberal uses of vivid and bright colors, but almost the entirety of the game is darker environments filled with darker grays, greens, and blues. It almost feels more akin to the 1995 movie than the animation in the actual game. The one thing that really irked me though was the draw distance on the enemies. It's understandable that it would be pretty low due to the hardware limitations, but it still sucks considering how fast the game is. That's essentially it for Ghost in the Shell for the PlayStation 1. It's still quite a decent game from what I've played, but it's so short and insignificant that, Compared to greater games, it's hard to recommend it to anyone but fans of Ghost in the Shell, or someone who might like this faster style of gameplay. If you're really interested in playing it though, I would honestly recommend just emulating the game. It's not like they're selling new copies of this game anyways. The developer sure isn't going to get anything out of it. Sony's too busy backing shitty movies to care about it, and THQ's defunct, so who's going to get your money now? If you really want a physical copy though, you can still buy them online through Amazon. It's like $25. Oh, it's being sold by THQ. Huh. Anyways, that's it for this episode. Again, I don't know exactly what's going to come out next. I have like 3 different videos that I'm either actively working on or trying to organize. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have my anime to watch. I gotta watch Masamune's gay girl cyborg concept. Yeah!